TOMMO'S Race CHINWAG, your favourite Formula 1 podcast produced by a British biased bloke with a massive Swede full of very questionable wheel knowledge. Broadcast live on YouTube and after the fact on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We have a good old natter about each and every Grand Prix of the season. My name's Tommo, let's talk about it. And we are live. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to TOMMO'S Race CHINWAG. Coming in live from the United Kingdom and joined as always by the sausage. Minton decided to join for this one. I don't know how long he'll stick around for. Welcome Johnny Jerome, Aidan Daniel Woodoo, David Destroyer, Abdul Priest, K Alexis, Vince and all of the rest of you here live on YouTube. Now the stream seems to be going okay. There's a couple of messages have popped up saying that there's some dodginess with buffering and all that good stuff. But let's see. Let's crack on and let's see how we go today. Let's talk all about the Chinese Grand Prix, shall we? Round 2 of the 2025 Formula 1 season around the Shanghai International Circuit, which I've got to say, I think, I don't know about you, Minton, but I think bit of a banging circuit, if you ask me. Do you reckon? No? Yeah? I mean, he doesn't like it because his favourite driver's Hamilton, because Ham. And we all remember what happened to him in 2007 around China, don't we? Oh no. Look at how sad he looks about it. Right, I'm going to put you down. Are you going to go? I reckon he's going to go back to, yeah. He's going back to bed. He's had enough already. Right. Back in China, Shanghai International Circuit. A circuit that, yeah, you know what? I like it. I enjoy it. Here's the track map. I've decided I'm just going to steal the track map from the F1 website rather than kind of doing my own version. And we'll briefly go over it, shall we? I want to do a little poll, first and foremost. It's so bad on F1 24. Well, yeah, that's the game's one thing, but real life's a different one. Right, so poll is, what do you think of the Shanghai International, I can't spell, but it doesn't really matter, circuit? Is it A, 4 options, is it a banger? Is it a clanger? Is it a small bang? Or is it a mild clang? Let me know. Let me know what you think live, people. Live here, live on YouTube Live, where we are live. I really like it. So, into turn 1, the identity of this circuit is turn 1. There's nothing quite like it on the calendar. The long right hand that just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. There isn't one line necessarily, and especially if it gets a little bit rainy, it's chaos, right? Even in the dry, you can take multiple lines. In the wet, it just multiplies it by another 2, 3, you know. And look, I think that, well, Seb and Daniel Kvyat, yeah, surely are the drivers who have brought the most attention to turn 1 Shanghai when Kvyat torpedoed Vettel. I don't know, man. Go watch that one back. I think that was very harsh on Kvyat because actually I think he was fully entitled to be where he was. And, you know, it's one of those incidents when you get drivers 3 wide, the driver on the inside, you can't really blame them for the driver on the outside and vice versa. And it's like the person in the middle, you know, it's turn 1 Shanghai. It will almost certainly catch someone out this weekend because it's a sprint weekend, remember, as well. It will almost certainly catch someone out, I think, in at least one of the races where it will go 3 wide and it will be not good. What do we think? What do we think in the poll? So we got 26% of you think banger, 58% of you small bang, 13% mild bang, and only 3% of you think it's a clanger. I agree with Team Small Bang. I've got to be honest. I like it. It's not one of my favourites, but I think a calendar with the Shanghai International Circuit on it is better from a racing point of view for it, okay, as far as I'm concerned. That's how I feel. I enjoy it. I think it's a good little circuit. So we've got the long right-hander, then turns 4, 5, 6. We've got a big braking zone. Don't typically get... It's a hard braking zone 6, but it's not one... You do see some overtakes, but it's not really known for it. There are 2 specific areas of this track that you see overtakes. There's a half chance at 6, for sure. And then obviously 7, 8, 9, and 10, high speed, A lot of G-force going through there, 4.5, 5G. Pushing it, and then into turn 11, another heavy braking zones. There's maybe a shot here, but then of course outside of turn 11, 12, 13, and then down the back straight, arguably it's not, you know, advisable to try and make the move at 11, because they might just get you back down the back straight. So turn 14, we've seen many a lunge down there. It's where last year Stroll punted Ricciardo, didn't he, at the end of the straight, but we've seen many a phenomenal overtake into turn 14. Many that haven't gone well as well. I remember, was it Verstappen and Vettel in 2018 when they had contact at turn 14? You can get it wrong. But it invites a lunge, does turn 14. So turn 14, turn 1 are the ones to particularly, I think, keep an eye on from an overtaking point of view. But 6 and 11, there's opportunities there as well. Don't remind me of Verstappen and Vettel, please. I'm sorry if that opened up some wounds. But listen, like Max terrorised the Ferraris in his early years. He absolutely, Kimi and Vettel, he terrorised, and Nico Rosberg as well. Lewis was too far up the road to really be getting to many ding-dongs with Max. It took a while for that one to burn, but it was certainly the Ferraris that marked Verstappen's card early doors. Kvyat hit Vettel in Russia. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, the one in Russia, I think, was more on Kvyat, to be honest, yeah. But the one in China, no. I think Kvyat was very hard done by, if you ask me. That's just my opinion. But there you go. 55.45 kilometers, 56 laps. Very similar in terms of in terms of distance to Albert Park last weekend. Not quite as fast a track. Albert Park's the 4th quickest track on the calendar. So it will challenge these cars in different ways, because we saw at Albert Park the McLarens really benefit from their tyre preservation. Okay, so we really saw that into the final sector, particularly in qualifying. But obviously the race as well really did showcase where you have that super quick left-right hander where Antonelli and Piastri got their moves done. That really does take it out of the tyres, and then they're screaming through that final sector. The McLaren seemed to be the only car that could hold on to its tyres through that final sector. You look at the, whether it was Leclerc or Verstappen relative to Lando, who put it on pole, and Oscar, who was up there as well. You know, they were close through the first, all of the cars up at the front were close through the first 2 sectors. It was only that final sector where Australia's a killer on tyres. Now, around Shanghai, obviously you've got that long straight at the end. It's a different challenge. I don't anticipate it's going to be as big an advantage for McLaren in terms of that tyre preservation point of view. Obviously, yeah, you've got turn 14, big braking zone, turning in, but it's slow corners, 14, 15, and, well, 14 and 16 are anyway. You've got that long back straight that gives time for your tyre temps to come down a bit. So it'll be interesting to see how that changes, again, the pecking order somewhat, because even in the race, you know, once Oscar got ahead of Verstappen, the McLarens just drove off. The Red Bulls Max couldn't do anything about it. It was 18 seconds behind by the time Fernando Alonso crashed on lap 34. So I'm excited to see how, and Ferrari, I expect them to be at the races. I mean, they just, it was a plethora of issues that just all kind of amalgamated together and completely shafted Ferrari's weekend. Their own strategy choices questionable, of course, in the rain, but they rolled the dice. It didn't pay off. I expect it to be a bit more calm in China. Obviously, only one FP1 session as well, given this is a sprint weekend. So the rookies who, fairly minimal running. Obviously, Hadjar didn't get to do a race distance. Did a lot of testing. Did FP1, 2 and 3, sure. But obviously didn't do any race running. Jack Doohan crashed as well early doors in the race. These rookies, sprints, second race, it's thick and fast. You know what I mean? Cheer up. Do I not look cheery, David? I'm sorry. I'm just in the zone, Just in the zone. But that's Shanghai for you. 56 laps of pleasure in the race, anyway. I'm not sure how many laps in the sprint. Maybe like 20, I guess. I don't actually know. Fine. OG Werp, you've made it to the live broadcast. Well, welcome. Thank you for coming along. I do appreciate that. But yeah, last time out, Max won in fairly dominant fashion. This was when Checo was still delivering at the start of the season. Remember, he had a decent start to the season, Checo. He was doing what Red Bull wanted him to do at the start of last season, and this was during that period. And this was where Fernando, in his Aston Martin, was running P2 at the start because he jumped Checo off the line, qualified P3. Didn't hold on in the race, and Alonso did fall back behind both Ferraris in the end. But this was when Aston Martin were pretty good, and now they're pretty bad. But yeah, Lando was up there, got P2 fairly comfortably in the end. In terms of other talking points from the race last year, I already mentioned Stroll going into the back of Ricciardo. That was a bit chaotic. And other than that, wasn't like, as it sprint 19 laps, close enough. Yeah, it was a decent race. It was fine. It was okay. Again, this was the early part of the season where Max definitely still had that advantage. You know, the fact that Sergio was up there as well, I think speaks volumes, because obviously we saw where he was by the end of the season. So, and look, time will tell how this weekend pans out, but I'm looking forward to it. I think this is... I don't mind China as a sprint race. I don't mind it. I don't mind it. I'm reserving my thoughts. I'm not massively high expectation for the race, but I think it could be all right, you know. And especially where they've changed the rules around Parc Fermé, which they did last year as well. I think that really does... It's not so much of a spoiler anymore, because, you know, you allow teams to go back to the drawing board, and setup is so pivotal to these cars. If you get the wrong operating window, it can make your car look... You can be world beaters or you can look like duds, right? Just through setup. So, you know, you have the sprint race, you take your learnings, you go back to the drawing boards, you do another practice session, and then you do the full race and see if you can learn from what worked and what didn't work. But again, that's the thing with setup, and this is why when I was in my sim racing era as a teenager, I stayed as far away as possible from setup. I would always like, just who's got the quickest setup on the leaderboard, download it and use that, because setup, every change you make has other knock-on effects that can often be quite unpredictable. So then you change one thing, so then you change another thing, but then changing the other thing changes the first thing that you did, and I don't have the capacity for that. Okay, that's not that's not in my remit. That's not in my wheel knowledge. All right, I stick to just having an opinion about vibes, and that's it. But yeah, Max won last time out. Could he win this time out? Listen, never look past Max Verstappen. Even with the McLarens looking as quick as they are, never disregard, never write him off. Okay, never. So, but that's definitely not right. Okay, so I've not updated. I did update them. What the hell, man? This is so weird. I definitely did update them. So we have a brief intermission while I just update the graphics, which obviously is, you know, it happens. Okay, and this is the beauty. Look, we're live, so I can't hide. Okay, I can't hide behind my incompetence. Okay, I can't hide it away so you lot never see it. It's just here for all to see. Okay, it's just here for you all to see. Weather-wise, I had made a brief look. Shanghai weather this weekend generally. Precipitation is pretty low chance. It's kind of mid-20s by the looks of it at the Shanghai International Circuit. So I would expect that we get a dry Grand Prix, which will be interesting because, again, I'm all for seeing... look, the driver standings are updated on Photoshop, but I just didn't update it to the PNG because I'm a fool. I'm an idiot. That's what I am. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see just in... chaotic Grand Prix are fun, but also there's so many caveats and it's hard to really be certain in your assertions and your opinions about what did and didn't happen. And we learned, I think, a decent amount from Saturday. That's why I was really impressed with the rookie pace in qualifying. I was, because they all did a decent job. I felt like there's the graphics that I had already done. I just forgot to add to the PNGs. Norris, Verstappen, Russell, Antonelli, Albon. Come on, Alex. You said, oh, you're glazing Albon. Well, yeah, I was. And turns out that's what he needed. All Alex needed was a little glaze, and now he's cooking. All right? So don't come at me again. And when he does have a stinker, which, you know, everyone does eventually, then we're banking this one, okay? We're banking this performance. Driver of the season so far, okay? Oh, dear. But, yeah, you'd expect the Ferraris to jump up this weekend. Obviously, Hulkenberg benefited massively from the safety car. Stroll, you know, he was running okay in the race, but, again, benefited from good timing under the SC. And Tsunoda suffered, you know, qualified really strongly. But I do think it's like not only are the top group closer, but now the kind of midfield, that gap between the top group and the midfield is smaller than it was. So you're going to start to see a bit more overlap. I mean, you know, in dry quali sessions, you know, Yuki and Alex out-qualified both Ferraris. I know Ferraris had their issues in the final sector, but come on. It's exciting. It's what we want to see, okay? A bit of unpredictability. But again, I feel like the way these cars are moving, and we'll talk about flexi rear wings, because I'm seeing a lot of misinformation. I'm seeing a lot of wild takes around this. So I just want to kind of cover it all off, okay, to what my knowledge is, what my understanding, having read what I've read and, you know, taken in what I've taken in, and see how it will affect the rule changes, because there has been an adjustment ahead of this weekend, which is mad to make. It is kind of crazy to make an adjustment to the rules during the longest flyaway race from where all of these teams are based in Europe, during a back-to-back as well. But I think that almost informs what the actual reasoning is behind it, if you ask me. Anyway, those are the driver standings. Those are the team standings. Lovely jubbly. Actually, yeah, let's talk about that now then, shall we? Well, once I've done this. This podcast, please give it a good rating. 5 stars would be lovely. A comment, engage however you can. It helps get the CHINWAG out to the world. Why remind you with my own words when I can just load? Oh, that's the wrong screen. When I can just load Tommo from the past. It's trying to live produce this. Sometimes I just click on the wrong thing and then I end up looking like a fool. Okay, like an actress. Right. Yes. So, McLaren rear wing. Now, flexi wings have been the talk of the town, talk of the moment, and we all knew before this season started that the FIA would be mandating a change in the static load test for the front wings, specifically the front wings, during round 9 or before round 9, the Barcelona Spanish Grand Prix. Okay, so currently the static load tests, I can't remember the exact number of newtons it is, but they're like forces that are put on 3 different points on the wing, so on each side, so I guess it's kind of 6 points in total, and that is how you measure the flexibility of a wing. Okay, that's the only way to do it. I'm talking about the front. I think it's 750 newtons on the rear, but I think it's less on the front. So I'll clarify the front wing thing first. So that's still happening. Round 9, Barcelona, those static load tests, which are done, while the car is, I don't know if they take the wing off the car. Maybe they do that. That would make sense, because why you don't have to have it bolted onto the car necessarily. I'm not sure exactly how the FIA do that test, but it's static load in a controlled condition in like one of the garages, I guess the FIA scrutineering garage or whatever it is. They put the static loads on, and then as long as it deflects by less than a certain amount, it passed the test. Right. So what they're changing from round 9 on the front wings is that tolerance, because this is the thing that all carbon wings will flex. That is physics, okay? It is not illegal. It is not cheating to have your wing flex, because they all flex. It's how much you allow them to flex. What is the reasonable amount the FIA decides that wings can flex, front and rear wings, right? So they're changing that test to basically reduce that threshold, the amount it's allowed to flex, by a third. So say it was, I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but say it's allowed to flex by, 1.5 millimeters, that is now 1 millimeter. So it's come down. No, that's incorrect maths. But it's reduced by a third. Okay, I'm just going to say that. Okay, about a 30% reduction in the amount it's allowed to flex within this test. So that's not changed. That's not changed at all. Now the rear wings, and this is where obviously after Monza or Baku. Was it Monza or Baku last year that the rear wings, where people were seeing the little mini DRS on the McLaren rear wing? It was one of them, wasn't it? Because obviously, was it Baku? Yeah. Okay. Because obviously that's where Oscar got his move done on Charles, which, I mean, would have benefited from every fraction of a mile an hour that was available, and a flexible rear wing could have given. Now, again, wings will always flex. Okay. The rule is not. The rule never, it's impossible for the rule to be wings cannot flex. The rule will always have to be wings cannot flex more than a certain amount that we can measure. Now, the FIA have decided to use static load tests as the means to measure deflection, whether it's a front wing or rear wing. Okay, that's the method that the FIA have decided upon. And obviously, applying static load to a wing in a garage is not the same as the load that is applied to the car when it is in use, okay? Going 180, 190 mile an hour down a straight. Those loads are way, way, way more, all right? Significantly more. But there's no way of safely replicating that within a environment that, you can easily test these things. Like there's so many factors, so many considerations. Now, you could argue that, okay, maybe the FIA should have a different system rather than the static load tests. They should, and we've seen with cameras, and they've been looking to see how much they deflect, blah, 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 right? But the static load test is the system that they've decided upon. Now, for the rear wings, the thing that's changed for China is that the amount the rear wing is allowed to deflect has been reduced significantly as far as what I've read, from about 2 millimeters to about 0.5 millimeter. However, because it's one race, it's literally back to back at a flyaway Grand Prix, it's actually 0.75 of a millimeter. But after China, in Japan, so in 2 weeks' time, it will be 0.5 millimeter. I think I'll kind of explain that as well as I can. But the reason, so this is what's weird, right? Because when McLaren, after Baku, had these little gaps opening up, right, mini DRS and all that, there was, again, and it was one of these where it was super opaque in how the FIA and Formula One decided to go about this, where like they said to McLaren, can you, and McLaren offered to change it. Like, I remember at the time it was like, okay, this seems a bit weird. Like, is it legal or is it not? Like, if it passed a static load test, that is what you're defining to be legal. So therefore, if it passed a static load test, it has to be legal. However, we don't know what went on. Okay, were McLaren told to change it? Did that? You know what I mean? So that was all kind of smoke and mirrors a bit. And then, of course, in testing, even after testing, Pierre Wache was like, who's Red Bull technical director, was like, oh, we think, McLaren and Ferrari are still at it. And then we saw, I think Mercedes was quite clear from some of the images I saw, that you could see their rear wing flexing, and front wings you could see from kind of all of them. If you can't beat them, join them, right? And now you're in a situation where there seems to have been some kicking off, and I've read various articles about, apparently people at the FIA not being happy with how much the rear wings are still deflecting. And so all of a sudden they've like very significantly reduced the amount that elements of the rear wing can deflect from 2 millimeters to 0.5 millimeter. So that's like a 4-time reduction in the amount in the tolerance available. Now, again, this is still in these static load tests, okay, which I believe some of you said I think it's about 750 newtons that is applied at different points, right? Now, what I think's gone on, right, is that the FIA have obviously been lobbied by teams to look at this, and teams aren't happy about it. For them to change it percentage-wise, the tolerance allowed, for them to change that percentage-wise by so much, it's like going to be 25% of what the tolerance was prior to China. Tells me that the FIA probably think that all the teams will still pass it, but it's almost like well, look, we'll just massively tighten up the tests, and these top teams will still pass the test, whether it's Mercedes or McLaren or Alpine. There's been mentioned Alpine of kind of engaging in it, and all the teams have engaged in it, right? And I just think we're at this point, right, where you can see, and we get this so often in these tight championship fights, and we saw this from 2020 going into 2021 with the floor changes at Mercedes. We see this so often with, when Red Bull at the start were running away, everyone's trying to peg Red Bull back, everyone's trying to peg McLaren back, everyone's trying to peg Mercedes back, and that's their job. That's the team's job, to lobby and try, and it's very political, right? This is what happens in politics, right? It's your job to lobby to try and get an outcome that benefits you, and that's Christian and Toto and they wouldn't be doing their jobs trying to hold Paul McLaren back. So I don't know. I just feel like, right, this change, I don't think it's going to change anything. I think all the teams will still pass. It would be like, if you've designed a rear wing that flexes less than 2 millimeters, say it flexes 1.5 millimeters, right? And I can't remember the exact numbers, so I'm just kind of giving an example. Say the tolerance is 2 millimeters, right? And it's agreed, right? And yours flexes 1.5. And then, but on back-to-back flyaway Grand Prix, the rule changes that, it can only flex 0.5 millimeter. So all of a sudden you're 1 millimeter over the tolerance. Like, I don't think that would be so unreasonable, that would be so egregious, that I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is only happening because the FIA firmly believe that all of the teams will still pass this 0.5 millimeter threshold, and then they can just be like, look, we've tightened it up, and if it's still flexing a bit, because the whole argument, the most compelling argument I've seen, right, or my understanding as to why the FIA want to keep a lid on flexible wings is a safety thing, which I can fundamentally understand. You don't want these things to get out of hand and teams to be really pushing the limits. Teams will always go for flexible wings. So the best way to kind of explain it is that you want, in low speed, you want the wings to be as aggressive as possible in low speed to, better traction out of the corner, obviously car balance on turning. And then in the high speed, you want those wings to be less aggressive because you don't want a car that's really skittish, and sensitive in high speed corners. You want less load on that front wing at high speed than you do at low speed. And if you can have wings that, and obviously from 26 we do have the active aero, right, which is going to essentially achieve that. It's going to stick the wings on in the corners, and then Bosch essentially DRS whenever there's no corners on the front and rear wings. Yeah, exactly. It's very similar to active aero in that regard. So it'll be interesting to see, from 26 onwards, whether active aero, whether flexible wings are as much of a talking point. I mean, there's probably still value to them, but probably less so than there are right now. Either way, I just don't again, safety point of view, to stop the teams really pushing the limits and then wings breaking, I guess, or just the cars getting too fast, maybe from that point of view they're thinking. Or it's just if you don't draw the line here, where do you draw the line? For me, I don't know. For me, it all comes back down to the decision that was made over the winter break to change these rules around flexible wings. And I never got it then, and I don't really get it now. Like, right, so you're the FI, you're making the rules, and you're making this rule book, right? This formula, okay? You're creating the formula that the teams have to abide by, right? Wings. You get into flexible wings, right? Obviously, wings have to flex. So that's just an objective truth. Wings will flex. How do we measure how much the teams are allowed to, right? Okay, we can apply so many newtons of force, blah, 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 right? Fine. Okay, well, we'll set the amount that they can flex to, 2 millimeters when 100 newton meters of force is applied at this point, for example, okay? Once you've set that rule, well, that is the rule. The rule has never been wings aren't allowed to flex. That's never been the rule. The rule is that wings can only flex within this range when this test is done. That is the rule. It's not like when Ferrari had their dodgy engine and the rule was you were only allowed this much fuel flow. That was the rule. The test is what Ferrari managed to circumvent, right? But the rule was that you're only allowed that much fuel flow. And Ferrari weren't doing that, and that was illegal, and that was all hushed up, whatever, right? I don't really get why it changed in the first place, apart from in the same way that the floor changes from 2020 to 2021, it's probably lobbying from other teams trying to get the top team slowed down, which again, that's their remit, that's their job. But I just think it would be nice to just, if the FIA and F1 were just honest and open about why, rather than just kind of keeping all the fans in the dark, because then we just end up speculating, and you get all these crazy theories, and like the truth is probably not that out there. But I don't know. I just don't really understand why it changed in the first place for me. But yeah, I've talked about this for plenty long enough anyway, but it is a big talking point going into this weekend. Again, to summarise, I don't think it will change much in the pecking order at all, if anything. But I do think round 9 will make a reasonably significant difference. I think so. Member for 20 months. Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate that. Thank you, David, for the super chat as well. When they do a pit stop with a penalty, it's never 5 seconds. The stop will be at least 8.5. So why not come in to do the change and then wait 5 seconds? When they do a pit stop with a penalty, this is a very different topic, David. But when they do a pit stop with a penalty, it's never 5 seconds. The stop will be at least 8.5. So why not do the change and then wait 5 seconds? I don't know what you mean, David. But thank you for the super chat. I do appreciate it. I do appreciate it. Thank you very much. Right. Excellent. Okay. We've done team standings. Let's do bangers and clangers, shall we? My predictions and your predictions for the 2025 Chinese Grand Prix. Okay. So, starting with race winner. Who's going to win it all this weekend? In the main race, obviously sprint is a thing, right? And we'll get a winner from that. I will probably not do a post-sprint stream because we've got a busy weekend just with IRL stuff. But possibly, we'll see. Maybe Saturday evening, I might do a post-sprint CHINWAG. But my winner of the 2025 Chinese Grand Prix, I'm saying, will be Oscar Piastri. I think he was close enough to Lando that it could kind of go either way, to be honest. And I think that Oscar coming out with so few points from that weekend, he knows he needs to not let Lando escape. And already Lando's got a 23-point buffer on him. So I think Oscar is going to be very, very, very motivated to do a very, very good job this weekend. I'm saying Oscar. Either way, it looks like it's going to be Oscar and Lando kind of having their own race at the front, especially again if there's not rain affecting, which it doesn't look like there's going to be at all. Now, of course, the tyre deg question, it might not be as significant a factor as it was in Australia, so it might give Max an outside chance. And obviously, again, I expect the Ferraris to be back. But I'm saying Oscar. Ray, I predicted Lando to win the first race. You can't say I'm trying to stick to my preseason predictions when I predicted Lando to win the first race. And I was right, by the way. So, come on. All right? It's also his 3/16th of... I swear, Oscar's got like a home Grand Prix everywhere, right? I know you are, Ray. I'm joking. Right, so, yeah, I'm saying Oscar. I'm saying Oscar to take it all, okay? Oscar wins the race. I mean, sprint, who knows? But the main race... I'm going Oscar. But what about you? Well, 1,450 of you voted. Thank you for voting. I do appreciate it. Appreciate you taking the time. And your race winner for the 2025 Chinese Grand Prix is Lando Norris. 44% of the vote, 32% Oscar. I think Lando got... You still predicted him to win the race last time, but I think with a slightly lower percentage. And Oscar... You still put second last time, but with a slightly higher percentage this time. So, be interesting. You're fairly split on that one. And you don't see polls. Panzer. Well, Panzer, if you're subscribed, you should see him on the homepage. Community posts that I do. Or follow me on Twitter, at TOMMO'S. Okay. Verstappen 12%, Charles Leclerc 6%. There is still some Ferrari belief in there. It's hidden deep down, but it's there. Right, banger driver. Okay, so again, sprint weekend, it's going to be tricky for the rookies. It's hard to pick. I mean, there were some very, very good performances. And again, it was such a chaotic Grand Prix. The conditions were so unpredictable and so out there. I'm going to go for Gabriel Bortoleto. I think he was fantastic in qualifying. Again, out-qualified Hulkenberg in both of their Q1 runs, by the way. Both of their comparable times in Q1. Gabby was quicker than Nico. And then in the race, Gabby was managing a brake problem. We heard this kind of post-race. He was not happy with the brakes on his car at all. And then the car did seem... Again, it's really hard to know. Still don't think we've got a confirmed answer. I mean, the car did brake before he hit the wall. That's an objective fact. Now, was it because he spun and he was loading up the tyres and it just did some mad torque and just broke something? I don't know, right? But it feels like it was a car issue more than anything else that ended his Grand Prix. So, Sauber aren't that strong, Avkid, no, but I still think Gabriel is going to find a way to, have a banging weekend within the limits and the constraints that is Sauber. Also, Sauber do seem to have a better car than they did at the end of testing. So, we'll see. Time will tell on that one. Your banger driver, again, is Carlos Sainz. You went with him last weekend. You went with him this weekend. There is still the belief from the Vamos army that Carlos will not let that spin into the wall, get his head down too much, and he'll smash it this weekend. We know the Williams does seem to be quick, and it was quick in all conditions in Australia, which is promising. So, up the Vamos. Very good, Mr. Baked Bean. He loves a baked bean, apparently, does Carlos. I've heard far too many Carlos Sainz interviews since he's been at Williams where he's like, I love baked beans. Because baked beans are grim. Sorry, Carlos, they're vile, man. Like, what's wrong with you? Of all the things, like a roast potato, come on. That's the British food staple, a proper roasty. Nah, man, baked beans are rubbish. Nah, I'm not having it. I'm not having it. Don't chat. Don't Rainer, Owen, Yash, Av. Don't start defending McFillin. I thought you were better than that. I thought you lot were better than that. Baked beans. I know someone who eats baked beans like cold. That actually makes me feel ill. Like even thinking about it. Grim. Awful. Listen, if you can't handle the truth, feel free to unsub, alright? Give me a roast potato anytime. Right. Okay, your banger driver, Carlos Sainz. My banger driver, Gabriel Bortoleto. Clanger driver. Tough, but I've gone Ocon. I'm going to say that Haas just seemed to be nowhere. I think Esteban would have rightfully been expecting a lot more than what they seem to have. And I think it's going to be a slog for him and Ollie. And I've just gone Ocon out of the two of them. We'll see. Your clanger drive is Liam, 26% of the vote. It's such a difficult race to analyze from Liam's point of view. You know, they gave him a bit of a weird setup, Red Bull as well. They put on a lot of wing on his car for the race, and he just couldn't make any progress. When he spun, he was on slicks. It's not like he spun on wets, but he did have a few spins in the race. That car, as I think Alex's description of the Red Bull in that high performance podcast interview he did is the most relatable way to put it. It's like driving that Red Bull is like trying to use the mouse when you have the sensitivity turned up to the max. It's just like, if you know what you're doing, you're a lot quicker. But most people are like trying to click anything and it's all over the gaff, right? So, it's a big learning curve for Liam. And I hope it's not ideal that it's a sprint weekend. That could work against him, but I do believe there's a lot more to be seen from Liam Lawson. And that's not only because I did content with Liam, which was released today on the Red Bull channels, if you want to check it out. And it will be continued somewhat throughout the season, which is fun. But yeah, no, there's more to come from Liam. I've got no doubt at all. I just think it was a very, very difficult weekend for him. Lance Stroll 16. How dare you? He was 6th in Australia, and you still gone Lance Stroll. 16% of you have just mindlessly clicked on Lance. All right. Look, to be honest, Lance does have a habit of he'll have one good race, and then it will just be he'll have a bunch of clangers, and then he'll have another good race, and then a bunch of clangers. So it's Mr. Inconsistent. 12% Lewis Hamilton. A lot to learn. We know this, and a sprint weekend is going to be challenging, but we'll see. 8% Ocon. So some of you think it as well. Right. Banger team for me. I'm going Williams again. I think with Carlos not having his spin, I think it could have been it would have been a really strong, double points finish. Maybe even Carlos Sainz get ahead of both Ferraris, considering Charles had his spin and Lewis came in late. I think, with the timing of the pit stops, I do wonder if Williams would have had the presence of mind to bring Alex in without Carlos being, from what we've heard, he was kind of pushing for them to bring Alex in when they did, which was the perfect time to bring him in. But I wonder. But yeah, a dry weekend around China, I think Albon and Sainz are going to cook. I'm excited for it. And your banger team is McLaren. 33% of the vote. 22% Williams. 12% Ferrari. Bounce back. Optimism. I like to see it. And 12% Mercedes. I'm still not Russell, Antonelli, different gravy. One of the best F1 debuts of all time. Absolutely. No question in my mind. And George was just, you didn't even see him because he was just faultless, just drove his race, didn't have to push like a madman, just kept it clean and got the P3. I still am not convinced on that car. Bit warmer this weekend, dry conditions at China. I'm not sure how the tyres are going to hang on. But hey, look, if Mercedes can be right up there in that title fight, please, that would be lovely. Okay. That'd be simply lovely. The more teams, the better. And then clanger team for me, Haas. For you, Haas. 43% of you went Haas. 13% Aston Martin. 12% Ferrari. 7% Alpine. So just as many of you think Ferrari is going to come of age as you do think Ferrari is going to absolutely stink. That's the beauty of it all. We just don't know. Bangers and clangers is done. Those are yours. And we are... Actually, we disagree on all bar one. So we will get a spread on the Sunday recap for this race. We will get a variety of takes and opinions. And I look forward to going 2-0 up because I won last week. All right? I won last week and I'm going to win again this week. All right? You'll see. It's going to happen. Right, team by team, briefly. not too much to say on Aston Martin. Honestly, like if I've not got anything to say, I'm not just going to say things for the sake of it. Not much to say. Alonso was. It does seem he was more unfortunate than anything else. Got caught out by gravel on track, which caused his spin. His pace was decent in the race. There's a lot of unknowns around Aston. Just Enrico Cardile, I think, still hasn't started yet. I don't expect really much from Aston Martin at all. I expect Williams and Alpine to leave them in the dust. 8th best team, I reckon, this season. Red Bull, again, Liam just needs a clean, dry weekend. Sprint, again, isn't ideal. Liam's never driven around Shanghai, which I did find out when we did our China circuit introduction video that we've done. He's never driven around it in person in real life, so that's always going to be an additional bit of challenge for him. But even if Red Bull can't give Max a car to be competitive to win the race, if Max can just keep getting podiums, keep being best of the rest, hope that Oscar and Lando can take wins off of each other, come round 9, it could be interesting. But again, Max won round here last year. I think I think he's in a good place to get it done. Mercedes, I mean, I've just said it really. George and Kimi, great drivers. Will they have the car? Not so sure. Williams, yeah, I think they're going to bang this weekend. Good momentum, happy days. McLaren, I don't think the rear wing change is going to affect them much, if anything at all. I think it's more just the FIA showing the teams that we're trying and they're still passing, so whatever. But time will tell on that one. Racing Bulls, very, very promising, actually. It would be really interesting to see if that was just a flash in the pan at Australia, because Isaac almost got to Q3 as well as Yuki. And I think that Yuki will sense an opportunity. He has to. Like, ultimately, Yuki has to keep driving the way he drove in Australia. Because if he does, then he puts himself in a great chance for a great seat in 2026. Be that a Red Bull, be that elsewhere. And if that Honda relationship, it does feel like Honda are not going to stand in his way from a Red Bull seat long term, which I did feel like was a problem. But from the quotes we've heard and stuff, it doesn't feel like it is going to be, which is really good, actually. Look, who knows? I hope it goes well for Liam. I hope it works out for him. I do think it will. Once we're halfway through the season, I think there'll be a lot more points on the board for Liam Lawson than they are right now, which obviously it's currently 0. But I just think, Yuki's making himself into a bit of a commodity, and who knows, right? We'll see how teams pan out. Obviously, Cadillac on the grid. Would you pick Bottas or would you pick Tsunoda? I think I'd pick Yuki if I was Cadillac. I think time will tell. Time will tell on that front. But yeah, come on, Isaac, get a race in. Love to see it. Haas, please just have been a bad weekend. Please don't be really bad like you have been in certain years in the past. Come on, give Esteban and Ollie something to fight with. I really hope that was just a one-off, because that's what I was saying in my last video when I put out yesterday. That 8 of the last 9 Grand Prix of 2024, Haas got in at least one car in the points. They got double points in Mexico. That's right at the end of the season. So they've gone from being a car that can consistently get top 10 with at least one car, so about as mid as midfield teams gets, to being absolutely off of the arse at the back. So how does that happen? But the margins are so fine, it clearly doesn't take much. A couple of missteps. We saw it from Aston Martin, drop like a stone. McLaren jump, which is, I think, is quite exciting. And I think Matthew, to say maybe it's the drivers, I don't think that's we've got nowhere near enough of a sample set. But what we have seen is that the Haas did a lot of laps in practice, and in quali they were nowhere, in the race they were nowhere. We know how quick Esteban is. We've seen how quick Ollie can be as well. So, yeah, I just think it's been a misstep from Haas, and it seems to have really, really snapped their ankles. Ferrari, yeah, I mean, again, they're not too worried. Fred doesn't seem to be too concerned. He's like, our season kind of starts at round 2, China, which isn't ideal if you want to mount a title fight. And, you know, you're meant to be giving your drivers their best chance at a drivers' championship since Charles been at the team. And it couldn't have started in a much worse a way. But, you know, I think at least they got some points on the board, right? Just communication, tighten that up. Just give them the car, man. Please, come on. Again, it was that final sector that just completely caught Ferrari out. I mean, Max dropped in the final sector relative to the McLarens, but the Ferraris fell off a cliff in that final sector. So hopefully for them, China won't be such a tired deg track. Sauber, promising compared to testing. Bortoletto looks rapid. Hulkenberg, consistent, got the job done. Good points on the board for them with P7. Big unknown, but I'm looking forward to Gabby. And then Alpine. Again, look, I said this in my video, all the rookies were quick. Arguably the most impressive rookie, certainly in practice and qualifying, was Jack Doohan. He was really running quicker than Gasly in Q1. On for a lap that probably would have, he was on pace to match Gasly in Q2, if not for Lewis's spin and the subsequent yellow flags. Obviously, the race immediately went wrong, but I mean, there's such crazy conditions that I think you have to forgive that somewhat. I think Jack Doohan's been able to show a lot of promising signs in Australia if you dig beneath the surface. And can he do it again this weekend in China? I hope for his sake he can, because he needs to be close to Pierre, like, immediately. Otherwise, it's not looking good, Brev. Did I see Ferrari merch that is champagne pop inspired look, and it looks very cool? I've not seen that, Halita, and I don't know if I want to. If it's looking a bit sus, mate. I'm not sure if I'm keen on that one. Right, okay. That's 57 minutes of chin wagging. That's a decent amount of time to wag the chin. Any questions? Any at the end, any other stuff we haven't covered that you're interested to? I don't want to be scared. Minton was here at the start. Yeah, he's now gone back to bed. I reckon I know exactly where he is. He was where he was, but I was like 3 minutes to go till the stream started. I was like, I'll grab Minton. All right, you lot deserve a little bit of Minton. Any news of cars? Oh yes, cars being late. Yes, I did. I saw a clip from, it was old Kim, wasn't it? Kim Illman. He posted something about a lot of the teams. I think it was Red Bull, McLaren. 2 other teams had their freight delayed, leaving Australia to go to China. There were some freight issues. So, yeah, a lot of the team personnel have kind of been able to take the day off. Obviously, they'll have more work to do when, I don't know too much about the details, but there is definitely something there. So maybe that's something to kind of read into. 2028 rumours. Yeah, so again, I've not read into this, but I did see some headline articles talking about V10s, sustainable fuels, all that. Yeah, look, of course, like, I'm on board. I think it was... Look, I'm not going to massively dog on F1 for this, because the whole automotive industry, not helped by governments trying to legislate all electric cars by a certain year either, but through decision, but also pressure from government, a lot of automotive manufacturers have pressed forward with their plans for EVs far too quickly, way before the infrastructure is there. Certainly in the UK, in a country like Norway, who has tons of oil riches, ironically, they can afford to build out the infrastructure. In the UK, like, you're cutting disability benefits for like it's crazy at the minute. Tax. Oh, it's just, yeah. So it's a bit chaotic, isn't it, at the moment? And I think that F1 just kind of followed that lead, and with a 50% ICE, 50% electric component in these engines, the engines were always going to be the thing that the engines were always going to be the thing that was most likely to make or break this 2026 onwards regulation cycle. And I don't have a huge amount of confidence. I think the field is going to be very spread, and I think it's going to be a shame. Obviously, manufacturers are bought into this whole 50-50 engine to then only run it for 2 years and then rip it up again and change to V10 seems incredibly inefficient. But if it's what the sport needs, because I feel like 26, I'm not full of confidence. I do think it's going to be an engine formula. That's what everyone with any knowledge of this stuff is saying. So why wouldn't I agree? V10s with sustainable fuel, and like truly sustainable fuel. And we're seeing, Paddy Lowe's doing his stuff. You'd have seen it in my quiz. Zero, he sponsors Sauber with his company Zero, which is kind of carbon capture. There's a lot of interesting science going on, and F1 has long been at the front of, research and development into new technologies that have run into road cars, and I think helping be a part of the solution to the future of, energy, fuel in the world is an important mission that I think F1 can kind of place itself front and center in. I mean, you can make arguments that, and it's impossible to measure, but you can certainly make the argument that the research and development of hybrid technology and just engine efficiency of Formula One over the history of the sport, the trickle down effect from that has offset all of the emissions that F1 has ever created through of all time. You can, I'm not saying that that's what's happened, but I'm saying that there is clearly a benefit that F1 has brought to engines that wouldn't, like, if you take F1 away and lose all that R&D, how much further these technologies would be behind where they are now. So yeah, there's a place for it. There's a place for electric cars, of course there is, but there's also a place for truly sustainable fuels. Now, look, how sustainable is sustainable fuel? Yeah, the word sustainable gets bandied around a lot by companies who want to posture and make themselves look at us, we're sustainable. Like, it's almost been used so much that it's lost a lot of its meaning. Like, truly sustainable, is that possible? Is that viable? Is that doable if the infrastructure is there? If it can be achieved, then I think Formula One is as good a test bed as any to go about trying to achieve it. So I'm all for sustainable fuels if they are actually achievable and not just, oh, look at us, we're sustainable. Like, actually solve the problem. That's what F1 teams are very, very good at. And you've got, Red Bull invested in their new facility, their engine development facility. You've got Audi coming on board now. You're going to have Cadillac eventually. You've got a lot of these minds working to solve these problems in a way that isn't just government saying you need to ban all fossil fuel powered cars by 2035. Like, that was always a stupid thing to try and mandate, because the infrastructure is not there. It's nowhere near there. And I do think, I think electric cars probably, I know it's sidetracking massively here. I think electric cars for daily, regular, normal use for normal people, probably is ultimately the future. But there's so many more applications out there, whether it's big haulage, whether it's planes, whether it's, and I'm talking jets to like small planes. I know it's possible to do electric, but is it actually, are you just pushing for electric for the sake of, oh, it's electric, so it must be sustainable, and then you're not thinking about all of the nickel and the cobalt and all of this, all these materials that are used, and like what happens to them at the end of life? Like, it's not as simple as I think it can. It's not that simple, basically, and that's why it's not a problem that's been fixed. Steam engine for 2030. Steam engine for 2030. Hydrogen's an interesting one as well. Like, I know obviously Toyota have put a lot into hydrogen, and it just never seems to have really caught on. Is it just a technology problem that once that technology problem is solved, it will become the best solution? Maybe. I just think, like, you know, electric only is clearly not the answer, okay? It's clearly not the answer. You can't transport. It's almost quite a privileged thing to be like, oh yeah, it must be electric everywhere. Because, like, what about in super rural parts of the world that don't have the same connection to the electronic infrastructure of the world? Like, if all cars become electric, there's so much of the world that doesn't have access to, and like, not just a plug, like actual like charging that is efficient and doesn't lose loads of energy and heat. Like, it's just not that simple. And I'm all for F1 being like, you know what, right, we can make these sustainable fuels, okay? Sustainable fuels that are truly sustainable and can actually be part of the future of not just motorsport, but just general automotive or just general applications, right? And we can stick them in these cars that have, and I noticed this in Australia, a lot more of the wide angle cameras, right? And almost like a bit of a hybrid between the old camera and the more like gimbal. The gyro camera, I don't mind on flat, on undulating tracks. The gyro camera kind of makes me feel a bit dizzy, I've got to be honest, but that's just a me thing. The wider angle camera, like these cars, when I was watching FP1, I was like, these cars, it looks like it's on like 1.2 times speed, because these cars look so quick. And like the onboard, that onboard of Kimi Antonelli overtaking Albon on the penultimate lap, like the sense of speed you get on that camera, and that is the gyro, by the way, but it's quite flat, so it doesn't mess with my head too much. So good. If you then add the V10 screen to that, which like is just, it's so evocative, and it's so like, there is something there on like a primal human level about like the noise that is just, oh. Now, whether it's a V10 or the V8 sounded much better than the current engines as well. V10 is probably my favourite of the, but I really like the V8s as well. They also, so I wouldn't be unhappy with a V8. However you're going to do it, to bring that sound back, I think that's one of the, 26, right? We're moving to smaller cars because the cars are too big now. The cars are going to be a little bit narrower, but a good chunk shorter. So the cars are going to be smaller, so it should be better racing. Active aero, hopefully they will be designed in such a way that the dirty air problem isn't such a problem. And that's always going to, it won't be a problem, and then it will become a problem again because teams will innovate and find ways of producing more downforce, which will create more dirty air, whatever. And then, so if you compare that up with, smaller cars, active aero, V10, sustainable fuel, save the planet, all that, but actually not posturing, actually doing something genuinely helpful. That's an amazing position for the sport to be in. And even if it means that these really kind of complicated Frankenstein 50-50 engines that they're doing for 26, even if it means we only get them for a couple of seasons, like, if that's what the sport's got to do, then that's what the sport's got to do. And again, I feel like you will get buy-in from the manufacturers, because so many manufacturers are now understanding that, hang on a second, we kind of try to run before we can walk, and going full EV, maybe because Porsche have started to step back their promises to go kind of full EV. Volvo, I think, as well. There's a few other manufacturers who have like been like, whoa, actually, hang on a second, maybe we're a bit too keen on this. So that means there is buy-in from the manufacturers, almost certainly. So if that's the way the manufacturers are going, that they're actually, okay, hang on, maybe there is a place for both. You know, a lot of these plug-in hybrids as well, that they do a really good job of still not given the impracticality of electric without the infrastructure, but still you can plug it, you can charge it at home if you've got a plug socket, and if you're just dawdling around the shops, you know, you've got the electric that you can just use. But then when you are doing long mileage, then your ice will kick in, and then happy days. So I quite like talking about this stuff. I find it quite interesting. I know it's a bit of a sidetrack, but hey, we're here. Hannah's out this evening as well, so I've got steak that I'm going to eat later, and it means that I can just kind of stream for as long as I want. All these save the planet rules and things are 100% not to save the planet. Well, and that is the you know what, J999, that is always the fear, isn't it? Because there's posturing, and then there's actually achieving change. And I do think F1's in a very unique position where, with the engineering minds, this sport can be part of developing the future that clearly isn't, you know, just drilling stuff out the ground or just solar panels or ugly wind farms. These are complex solutions to complex problems, and I think F1 can be there, but it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. I think most people will care when it starts to hit their pockets, though, which it will. So, yeah, most might not care now, but I think they will eventually. Anything else? Anything else I want to say? What was the best sized era of F1? I mean, ultimately, Bill, I think the smaller the cars, the better. I think the kind of mid-early 2000 cars just look so nimble. Like, you watch replays, and maybe it's kind of the frame rate messing with you a bit as well. But these cars, you know, in those kind of mid-early 2000 era, not only even listen, you know, watch clips with the sound off. Like, they were so much smaller. Even smaller than, like, some of the cars in the early 90s. Well, I've been fortunate. I've been to, you know, I've seen a few early 90s F1 cars in the flesh. They're big. They are thick, and the tyres are massive. But the mid-early 2000 cars, those were so nimble, and they're iconic to me because that's the era I grew up watching. So there's probably a bit of bias there, but I just feel like, yeah, the smaller you can make the car, the bigger the circuit becomes relative to the cars, and therefore the more space you have to go wheel to wheel, you know, and not just pushing everyone off track every possible moment. Yeah, 2004, you said, Charmander. Thoughts on if refueling will ever come back? Special K, I don't particularly not fussed about refueling coming back. I would rather energy be put into making a tyre compound or set of tyre compounds that drivers can push on. It's obviously, it's not an easy job that Pirelli do, but a tyre compound where it doesn't always need to be managed. You know, these cars, you know, and again, improvements in efficiency, you shouldn't need to refuel. And races are long enough, so I'm not fussed about refueling. But in terms of a similar kind of change, I'd be more likely to, you know, look at making tyres that the drivers can push on and not having to always drive within themselves, because I think that's part of the fun, knowing that these drivers are going 100%. But whenever you see a race and all the drivers are like, yeah, I had to drive at like 80% the entire Grand Prix because the tyres were going to fall off. It's like, oh, that kind of like, it kind of takes a little bit off the post enjoyment, if you ask me. So I wouldn't say that that's a necessary thing, in my opinion. McLaren are going to win by 20 seconds. They could do. They could well do, Airbus. They could well do. How many spins offs do you predict to happen across the whole weekend in China? I wouldn't say, Jessica, I'm not sure if, I don't consider China to be a particularly, you know, there's some pretty significant runoffs. You're fairly set. Obviously, turn 14, does trip up people quite a bit because you get people making lunges, and I don't know. I don't expect a crazy amount given the conditions are probably going to be pretty calm. I don't expect it to be super crazy, but again, it's a good overtaking track, China. So from that point of view, I'm excited. I think it'll be good. Do you watch in 4K? I don't. No, not really. I just watch on my phone a lot of the time, to be honest. What do you think of the V8 supercars when you're in Melbourne? I mean, I've only ever seen a V8 supercar once, and it was I went to the Pro Drive factory a couple of years ago, and they had a old V8 supercar from like, I want to say like it was a Falcon, and it was like from the mid 2000s. Oh, mate. And it was massive, but it just looked so cool. So cool. I loved it. Back to Bridgestone, different. I mean, look, whether it's Pirelli or Bridgestone or Goodyear or Dunlop or whoever's making the tyres, I mean, it's like, I don't care what the brand is. And I don't really want a tyre war again because it's just another differential. I think I'm happy with one manufacturer and same tyres for everyone. I'm happy with that. I think once you start adding different tyre manufacturers, it's already super complicated, this sport. And I think that is an unnecessary additional, differential, if you ask me. Is F1 TV worth it? I couldn't tell you. Because, I mean, I've got like the basic F1 TV. I pay for like the basic F1 TV. If I could watch it all, like, I would certainly give it a go watching the races on F1 TV. But I'm in the UK, I can't, so it has to be Sky. Thoughts on the South African Grand Prix? I mean, I've said it a long time. I think I'd love to see Kyle Army. I certainly would rather see Kyle Army on the grid than whatever the track plan is in Rwanda. Not just for political reasons, but also because of political reasons. And Kyle Army is an iconic venue. And you're going to the tip of Africa. Decent in terms of, I can't complain. Time-wise, time of the day. There's barely any change from the UK. I did see some. I apologise to any Australians who didn't realise I was kind of being a bit facetious when I was joking about time zones in the last stream. I definitely really do feel for you having to get up at the crack of dawn for almost every single Grand Prix. So no, I was very much pulling your leg on that one. Drivers, I still think going to 1080p. Yes. Right, cool. I'm gonna wrap it. So thank you all for coming. I really do appreciate all you here live. Shelby, Halita, Charmander, Matthew, Oliver, Gobaru, Airbus, Sim, Aiden, J999, Mark, Aaron. Did you watch the Race of Champions? I did not. Not this year. Forgot about that. Thank you all. Appreciate you all taking the time. Please drop a like on this stream if you did enjoy it. Subscribe if you're new and you want to see more. And just make sure you rate, do all that good stuff, all right? If you've never commented before, this is the one to comment on, okay? Appreciate you all. My name's Tomo. Thanks again. Have a good one. Ta-da.